2024 is almost over, which means we are officially halfway through the decade. So what we thought would be kind of fun is to take a look at the 20 most influential roller coasters of the 2020s.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that this is not based on just preference. Like, there are coasters that we like much better that are not on the list. There are coasters we haven't even ridden on this list, but it is based on like what they have done for the industry or like just roller coasters in general.
Yeah, so this could be because of innovation, the technology used for the attraction. It could be because it like pushed the industry forward in some way. It could even be a negative effect on the industry. We cover just about everything. These are roller coasters around the world. I say let's get into this.
Absolutely. So the first one, we're going to start with one that's a little bit obvious, and then, you know, maybe further down get into some of the more obscure, like, really, that one? The first one will be Velocicoaster.
I feel like this one is pretty straightforward. Not only did it do wonders for Universal as well as Orlando, but it just put like the Intamin multi-launch on a global scale, where everyone was like, holy crap, like, the rides that they can do are just like otherworldly, you know? This instantly became so many people's number ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also like the timing of it makes it very significant. So this was being worked on like during the pandemic. There were a lot of roller coasters that were put on hold completely during the pandemic. And this was like, no, we're going to use this time to like power through this and get it done quickly.
Yeah, it was just very, very impressive. Islands Adventure has not been the same ever since Velocicoaster opened. I know so many people that like flew down to Orlando just to ride this one ride. And like, you have to be a really good ride to have that kind of influence.
Well, that, and yeah, it's like not even just enthusiasts. Like, you have to look at it on like a big scale, and like your average person is like, oh, have you done the Velocicoaster yet? And like, that says something.
Well, and look at the type of elements that it does. Like, these are pretty extreme maneuvers that the average guest who's visiting Universal has never done anything like before. And I just think that like speaks wonders to the type of rides and attractions, like how can we push the boundaries for the future. Let's move across the pond to Germany for Phantasialand's Fly, the first Vekoma flying coaster. This is the next generation flying coaster. And I just love what Vekoma did here that like pushes the boundaries of what a flying coaster can be.
You know, Vekoma had like the Flying Dutchman or whatever, and like, let's be real, they're kind of crap.
Yeah.
And then B&M has been doing flyers for a long time, and those are known for like being extremely intense. This really tries to actually feel like what I imagine flying would feel like.
Yeah.
And the maneuver that we can't show because there's no footage out there at all, and we do not have any, of how it goes from the sitting up straight position into the flying position and back to it is extremely innovative and cool, and I pray that we see more of these soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest complaints that you get with like a B&M flying coaster is when you hit the brake run, you're just left dangling there. And that was like one of the first things that Vekoma wanted to solve. And that is incredibly creative and very much appreciated.
So the next one I'm going to say might make some of you go, But when we explain it, you'll understand. The next one's going to be West Coast Racers at Six Flags Magic Mountain, a premier multi-launch dueling coaster.
In the same park is Twisted Colossus, which has an identical setup, except the problem is that it rarely ever duels because it is reliant on extremely quick operations that aren't always realistic. And West Coast Racers fix that problem.
I mean, for me, I would say it's like one of the more impressive coasters from Premier.
Yeah.
Especially modern ones. Obviously, the trains are still not ideal, but we're like focusing more on like the impact. And I think that it really did show like, okay, there is a way to do this without having to push your operators too hard or do some really crazy programming. Like, here's a way that we can do it and have it work every single time.
Yes. Our next attraction is our first roller coaster on this list that neither one of us have experienced yet. It's Beyond the Cloud over in China. This is an Extreme Mach Rides launch coaster. And I think that this ride just really shows the full potential of what Mach can do.
Yeah, I mean, Mach has definitely had like a really good run the last few years.
Yeah.
But from what we've heard, this is some of their best work.
For those unfamiliar, this is a hypercoaster. It stands 205 feet tall, max speed 80 miles per hour. This is by far their craziest launch they've ever done. That is insane, especially for a ride that is like relatively obscure to like the average coaster enthusiast. But this thing is no joke.
The next one on the list is objectively not one of our favorite coasters that opened up in the last few years. It is good, but that would be Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger. And the reason that that is such a significant coaster is because it literally reignited the relationship between B&M and Six Flags, which hadn't existed for a pretty long time.
Yeah, it'd been like 10 years, I think. The last one that they had done prior to this was like X-Flight at Six Flags Great America. And the other thing that I think Dr. Diabolical did that caught everyone off guard. It was the first B&M coaster to go beyond vertical. They said we're going over 90 degrees for that first drop. And prior to that, we'd never seen a dive coaster do that. And Dr. Diabolical proved that, hey, B&M was willing to push the boundaries, try and catch up with the other manufacturers.
Yeah, but it's, since then we've had multiple coasters from B&M either go into construction or already been built for other Six Flags parks. And now with the merger and everything, I imagine it's just going to continue.
Yes. Let's head down under to the Gold Coast of Australia for Leviathan at SeaWorld. And this ride is massive. It is a Martin Vlemmick's Gravity Group wooden roller coaster. Took several years of construction and is only one of 2 wooden roller coasters open in the entire country of Australia. The only other one out there, the second oldest operating coaster in the world. And now that Leap the Dips is SBNO, that would actually make it the oldest operating coaster.
Oh wow, that's weird. This is pretty significant for Australia because in relation to how big the continent of Australia is, to like how many parks and roller coasters we have, there's not a ton. This was like a nice step forward of like, let's just keep adding big investments.
Yeah, well, and also Australia is extremely strict with like their building regulations and codes, and to make a wooden roller coaster happen, I know is extremely complicated. So the fact that this ride exists is actually a lot more impressive than people give it credit for.
Next up is one of my favorite roller coasters that have opened in the last few years, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. I think this doesn't need much of an explanation as to why it's so significant. The way the vehicles move is just state-of-the-art and had never really been done before.
Yeah, this was a true collaboration between Disney, Imagineering, and Vekoma, the manufacturer. It took like 7 years of development from R&D, construction. It was a long time coming. It was the first roller coaster to open up at Epcot, which itself is a huge deal. And as of right now, it is the most expensive roller coaster ever built. So including that R&D, as well as just the thematics and everything that they built around this coaster is very impressive. And over in Spain, a different manufacturer did their own take on that style of ride, and that would be Intamin with Uncharted at Portaventura. This is another roller coaster that neither one of us have experienced before, but it just elevates the thrill level just a bit. It's a bit more creative with like the maneuvers and the way that the vehicle rotates around.
I don't know anything about it. I don't want spoilers.
I will say that thematically, no one really raves about this coaster, but technology-wise, I think it's very impressive, and I think that it is something that is actually going to be advanced even further with the new Fast and Furious coaster opening up at Universal Hollywood, which would be featured in the next video that we'll make in another 5 years.
So obviously RMC has done a lot of wooden coaster conversions to iBox track. However, you can't have a list like this without including Iron Gwazi because like Velocicoaster, this is another one of those roller coasters that just hit the #1 spot on so many people's list of best roller coaster in the world.
Yeah, I think between this and Velocicoaster, Florida really like smacked down his presence as, hey, we are like the roller coaster capital of the world in terms of like not just like family attractions, which they already were, but like, hey, we have some of the world's best thrill coasters as well. And Velocicoaster Iron Gwazi is an insane 1-2 punch. And RMC, you guys are wild for converting a GCI dueling coaster into one hyper hybrid. Like, what a feat of engineering.
Absolutely.
I'm so impressed by this ride. Might just be the best coaster in America.
I think it might be.
And speaking of best coasters in the world, one of our all-time favorites, as you can see by this poster right here, is Ride to Happiness at Plopsaland. So this is the second ever extreme spinning coaster to open after Time Traveler, and they just dialed it up. You know how at Time Traveler they were like, we're not going to make it too extreme, we have a controlled rotation. Plopsaland was like, no, like, let's get this thing moving. And the maneuvers are crazier. It was just one of the most mind-blowing experiences we've ever had on any roller coaster.
I mean, you pretty much summed it up. It's one of the best roller coasters in the world. Again, if it's making a bunch of people's like #1s and it's sending all these people to go out to Belgium to ride it, it deserves to be on the list.
Yeah, and I think that it absolutely could be the best roller coaster that Mach has ever done, and I think it just further lays the groundwork for more extreme spinning coasters in the next 5 years.
Next up on the list is a roller coaster that probably got a little more of a beating than it deserved because of its lack of theming, but it is very significant as a coaster overall, and that is Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg.
Yeah, I think what makes this ride stand out in particular is that it was the first time that we really saw Intamin break up a launch section with an airtime hill in between. So you have like one set of LSMs and then an airtime pop and then another set of LSMs. So it was a very odd and unique sensation to all of us when we first did that.
Yeah, it's very interesting because in like another world, 2020's would have been on this list instead of Pantheon because that was technically announced first for this style of ride.
It was delayed.
But it was delayed.
Yeah.
So
technically,
that's
so is Pantheon.
Yeah, yeah, just not by as much. But yeah, this ride definitely deserved more from the park because it really is a great ride and it was very significant.
Yeah.
In this period of time, but alas.
Yeah, I strongly believe that we'll see more of these style of rides in the future. Like right now it's just Pantheon and 2020's, but if anything, the new ones going forward will be even better. One of the latest and greatest family coasters to make its debut is Big Bear Mountain at Dollywood, and this ride got everyone talking. Everyone was like, this is the future of the family coaster, and I can see why.
Typically, whenever coasters are made nowadays with a launch, you will usually see an LSM launch or like a tire-driven launch, especially on family coasters. Vekoma said, you know what, we're going to bring back LIM, because why not?
Yeah, from what I understand, LSMs would have been too heavy for the trains. They're literally using like a modified version of their like family boomerang trains, and they do so in a very creative way. Big Bear Mountain has 3 launches, incredibly long and drawn out layout. Like this truly is a ride for everyone.
Yeah, I think it is one of the best accomplishments in like the family coaster world.
Absolutely.
Ever. And I think going forward that really set a crazy high standard for family coasters going forward.
Yeah.
Up next is a coaster that we are thanking our lucky stars that we even got to ride. That is Mission Ferrari, the one and only SFX coaster by Dynamic Attractions.
Yeah, this one was another long time coming. Much like Guardians of the Galaxy, so much R&D went into this thing. But this one had a lot more roadblocks that just kept on causing delays. And even now that it's open, it is still having some issues that are keeping it not super consistent in its operations, but we did get the opportunity to do it, and it was very, very cool. But we probably won't be seeing any more of these because Dynamic has since gone under. Essentially, they won't be making any more rides going forward.
Yeah, well, you're talking about significance. This was the ride that like killed Dynamic, and
yeah, they invested so much money into it that it literally like sucked them dry.
Mm-hmm. And we've lost other manufacturers along the way because of really big, outrageous, daring projects. And unfortunately, that was this for Dynamic.
Yeah, it was this as well as their 2 projects in Malaysia. I mean, they literally started building another SFX coaster over at Genting Skyworlds, and that one is not gonna open.
No.
So this is more than likely gonna be the only one that we ever see. And speaking of rides that took way too long to build, Lagoon spent years and years and years working on Primordial. So this is a one-of-a-kind family coaster that really combined multiple different types of rides. It's a mostly indoor coaster, it's also a shooting ride, has a lot of dark ride elements, but also some very unique tricks.
I think what makes this ride an even bigger deal is, like the other coasters that Lagoon has done, it was made in-house. So for like a relatively small park to create something on this scale that is like super innovative and cool and unique and different and all those things is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it's very well themed. It's like a step below what you'd find at like, you know, one of these Disney or Universal properties. Like all the groundwork is there. You know, again, it's not the greatest ride experience, but all things considered, it is very, very cool.
It's very cool. So as someone who has never really been a fan of stand-up coasters, riding Pipeline at SeaWorld Orlando was a pretty big deal because it was the first time that I rode a stand-up and I was like extremely into it.
Yeah. They completely reshaped the vision of a stand-up coaster. They said, you know, what if the ideal sensation that you're getting here is airtime? Before it was all about just like positive G-forces. And now you are literally being lifted up off the board. And that was a wild sensation.
Absolutely. I think that this will definitely pave the way for future coasters in this style. Obviously, Pipeline is a prototype, but I think that the best moments on it are the ones where you're getting a lot of negatives. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to see in the future for them to come up with big, sweeping camelback layouts.
Yeah.
But it really did change like my entire perception on stand-up coasters and what they can do. The technology is crazy. Like the whole concept of like the seats going up and down. All extremely cool, and I think that this was a huge win for B&M.
Yeah, I think this was their best innovation of the decade. We got one more RMC coaster that we want to talk about, and this is Airy Force One at Fun Spot Atlanta. And I feel like this is significant for a couple reasons. One, it got everyone talking because Fun Spot Atlanta getting an RMC, like that small little park that wasn't really known for anything, and the few people that went were like, not
Oh,
super
it wasn't
impressed
good.
by it. Yeah, and they just got a world-class roller coaster.
Now it's good.
Yeah, now everyone wants to flock there. And also, from an RMC perspective, this was the first time that we got a completely all-steel coaster, ground up. And I think we're going to see a lot more of those going forward.
Yeah, I do too. I think that a lot of the coasters that like parks wanted to have converted have already been done.
Yeah.
So I think moving forward, it's going to be a lot more like starting from the ground up. I think this was also the first layout done entirely by Joe Draves.
It might have been, yeah. I mean, because he's, Alan Shoki has since retired. And
He was a legend, an absolute legend.
How do you follow him up? Well, Joe is dang good. He did this in Wildcats Revenge. Wildcats Revenge did not make this list, but that is another fantastic RMC. Airy Force 1, I think, exceeded all of our expectations.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. So the next ride on this list like barely counts. Like it's just kind of making it into these like 5 years of the 20s that we're talking about. And that is Donkey Kong Minecart Madness that is opening at Universal Studios Japan this year, barely, and opening at Universal's Epic Universe next year.
Yeah, so they're currently doing previews over at Universal Studios Japan right now. As we made this video, it was supposed to open earlier this summer. Obviously it didn't. That's why we did not get to experience it.
Rats.
Very bummed. These rides have been in development for a very long time, using very unique technology of having a typical roller coaster track that they have now rotated 90 degrees to be on its side. And the actual ride vehicle is situated several feet above the track, so the heart lining is completely different. That is so complicated.
It is.
I think that is going to be really, really cool if done well, and knowing Universal, I'm sure it will be.
Very state of the art.
Yeah, I can't wait to experience this. I'm not expecting it to be anything crazy. Like it's still a family coaster, but like technology-wise,
And visually, I think it'll be very cool.
yeah, just all around brilliant. A ride that opened earlier this year that got everyone's attention was Hyperia at Thorpe Park, because the UK have been starved for a huge new roller coaster, and they finally got it. This is the tallest in the entire country, like speeds of up to 80 miles per hour.
I think that when we're talking about significance, like there have been other mock hyper coasters done, but I think looking at it from the UK perspective, like you said, like this is a huge deal for them.
Oh yeah.
I don't, like, when is the last time they got something that big? I guess
Big one, or stealth?
Stealth?
Stealth, technically? Yeah, it's been a long time.
It's been a long time, yeah. I'm very excited for our UK friends. I mean, it's an amazing coaster. It was not the best to open this year. We'll get to that one in a minute, but fantastic.
Yeah, for sure.
So when we're talking about significance, it could be in a positive way, right? Where it's moving the industry forward in some way. Or it could be in a negative way where maybe something happened with it where it really like shook everybody.
You could probably see where this is going.
Yes. This was one actually we originally didn't think to put on the list, but it was suggested to us by a friend, and they're like, maybe it wasn't the like most profound thing in a good way, but it still impacted the industry. That would be Top Thrill 2. The first ever major overhaul by Zamperla of a coaster made by Intamin originally. Nothing like this has ever really been done between any two companies.
Right, and I think that's why this is such a big deal, because this was an incredibly ambitious feat. Like, no matter what happened, you have to give Zamperla props for just going for it, because I think anyone would struggle with this. They had to do a completely new launch system. They had to do a new switch track. They had to do new trains. These are the first Lightning trains that made their debut.
They've also just never done anything on this scale, ever.
Yeah,
Not even
yeah.
close.
It's 400 feet tall.
To be fair, the only company that really ever has is Intamin.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was open for 8 days, and those who rode it, including us, loved it. It was fantastic. I think that this is a great, great ride, arguably better than the original. It just clearly is having some issues as of when we're filming this.
Yeah, it was kind of a shock to the system, I feel, for people, because it was already like, oh my gosh, the dragster is done, and then it was like, oh my gosh, maybe it's getting redone, and then it was like, it's gonna be Zamperla, and then it opened and people loved it, and then it was closed so quickly, and it was just like kind of this thing that jostled up the industry, and it's got this weird like looming aura around it of, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? And I wonder if going forward, if this will deter other companies from wanting to take something like, not necessarily like a 400-foot coaster, but from retrofitting something from another manufacturer.
Yeah, or just like changing out an old launch, because these hydraulic launch systems are starting to go away. Parks are realizing that, hey, these are very expensive. We probably don't want to keep these around. Case in point, King Dakar. After everything that happened with Top Thrill 2, the new Six Flags decided, you know what, we're not even going to bother refurbing it. We just want this ride gone.
I think in like an alternate timeline of like the universe, if Top Thrill 2 worked out perfectly and everything was fine, I think that we would see something very different going on with King Ka right now. So again, talking about significance, that's a pretty big deal.
I know that they are back to the testing phases for the attraction, so hopefully we see an early 2025 reopening, and I really wish them the best. I hope that it is successful.
Oh yeah,
and
I want it
everything
to work.
works.
It was really good. I want more people to get to ride it.
Yeah, absolutely. We got one more roller coaster that we want to talk about, and I feel like this one is a no-brainer. It's the best new attraction of 2024, Voltron at Europa Park.
The first ever mock striker coaster, which for the life of me, I'm still trying to figure out what that means, what the word striker means, but I do know that it is an amazing ride. It was like, if you were to give a company like almost an endless budget is what it felt like. It was like, create your best thing that you could possibly do, and they're like, boom, we got it.
Yeah, we did an amazing interview with the layout designer from Mock. Go watch that video because it was so interesting hearing him talk about like the process that like Europa Park had these crazy high requirements of capacity, and they said they want to be a long ride, and they just like threw everything at it, and the ride experience is unparalleled.
Yeah, I think that like they really set an extremely high standard for like, hey, this is what we can do. There's already another striker coaster under construction at Fantasiana in replacement of their Wild Train. I don't know that we're gonna get one quite on this scale again.
I don't think we'll ever get one on this scale again. Like,
I know. Well, because you know Europa is like Mox Park, so
Yeah.
if they're gonna put their biggest attraction anywhere, it's gonna be there.
yeah, and they
So I
have
get
a
it.
very high budget. You need a big name park to go with something like this, you know? The 20s were filled with a lot of amazing things, but like this was Mock's time. They've really shined in the past couple of years. I've been so impressed with everything that they've put out. Same with Vekoma. Vekoma has just been on top of it. Like we talked about a lot of amazing coasters, but there's a couple that didn't make the list. I would shout out how Zuberkoff and Nafina Force, the Vekoma STC, is like completely reshaped what used to be their old SLCs.
If I were to give another one, maybe Defiance. To see something like that built on the side of a cliff is like pretty insane. Like it's not a huge ride, it's not the most amazing thing in the world, but like the fact that they were able to do that is pretty crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there. Let us know down in the comments below, what do you think are the most significant roller coasters of the 20s? So any ride that opened from 2020 until 2024. It's been a crazy past 5 years.
Yeah, and we still got 5 more. I mean, you're not going to see another video like this for 5 more years, sorry. Hopefully you're still here watching by then. But let us know, like, what did you think? 2020, 21, 22, 23, or 24? Which one had the best coasters overall?
That's tough.
I know.
There are so many good ones.
I know. If you had to pick a year, let us know what it would be.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
No, we'll see you in 5 years.
Yes, correct.